Oh, I noticed a thing. We are forgetting to introduce the podcast with some regularity.
Yeah. Well, it's sometimes the podcast comes on the radio and people don't know.
People don't know what it is.
The FCC.
I'm serious, though.
Whoever's in charge of the airways comes on, tells us we have to announce our name.
You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll them dice. You better roll them dice. You never know if it could change your life. Take a chance, you're neither wrong or right. You never know if you don't roll those dice. Man, life's so ill.
This is Dungeon Master of None. I'm Dungeon Master Rob, and on the other side of the country, in the sweaty armpit of America, is my co-host Matt. Welcome, Matt.
Yeah, welcome. We're here for the special breaking news edition. Headline: Chiron screams. Paizo struggling, failing Paizo. Backpedaling, releasing a second edition to stave off bankruptcy.
Loser Paizo. Yeah, we are here to talk about the big news of the day, which is, of course, not what Matt is talking about, Paizo, but the return of the much vaunted Dragons of America Kickstarter. That's right, folks. It's back.
Fuck, I forgot about
It's back. You thought that it was canceled, but you were wrong. It's back on Kickstarter and relaunching on March 13th. No, that's I'm sorry. That's not true either. We are here to talk about Paizo. Matt, why don't you lead us off?
Okay, so Paizo is releasing a second edition of the role-playing game Pathfinder. If you don't know what that is, well, we're going to tell you.
Basically, what it is a good way to think of it is D&D 3.75 or 3.5 advanced or something like that. Paizo started off as a company that made adventure paths and supplements for 3.5, and when Wizards of the Coast made their dubious decision to transition to a radically different system in 4th edition, they decided to keep producing materials in the 3.5 aesthetic. But they changed some things. They made it a little bit more user-friendly. They launched their own game world. And this is the best thing about it. They made it open gaming license. All of Paizo's stuff has always been OGL.
Yeah. Pathfinder and Paizo are great for a number of reasons, right? The company started off making Dungeon and Dragon magazines and really producing some of the best content that's ever come out in those magazines. Those are dead now and have been for a really long time. And Paizo, if you listen to our Dungeons and Data episode or look on our website, Pathfinder was really the best-selling version of Dungeons and Dragons on the marketplace for really a number of years. So, in a nutshell, Pathfinder is an alternate version of Dungeons and Dragons,
and it's very recognizably D&D. It has all of the things that you would know and love. It has rogues and fighters and wizards and clerics and all that, but it has a little bit extra. And the world that it's set in is Golarion, which is a little bit like Forgotten Realms, and it's sort of a grab bag, but a little bit more innovative and
a little bit more pulpy too.
It's a little bit more pulpy,
which is fun.
And as a whole, it suffers from the same problems that Forgotten Realms does, but there are some individual pockets that are very interesting. And like we said, they have written some really tremendous adventure paths that has always been Paizo's strengths. Some of the best adventure paths ever written for Dungeons and Dragons in any edition have come out of Paizo.
And if we wound back the clock to like a week ago, where we didn't know that Paizo was coming out with a second edition, what would you say about Pathfinder? Like, what's good and bad about it as it stands today? The game you could play right now if you wanted to for free, as Robert mentioned, because everything's on the OGL.
One of the things that's great about it, well, actually, a lot of the things that are great about it, I'm going to start with, are things that are not free. The art is tremendous. I think that the art of Pathfinder is some of the best in the game, in any space. It is truly, it is bright and vibrant and pulpy, and I've forgotten the artist's name, but he's coming back for 2.0. The other thing that's great about Wayne Reynolds, thank you. I hate to lean on this, but I have to acknowledge it. Pathfinder is the most woke. It is the most woke of all of the role-playing games out there. And they lean into it, and they do a good job of it. They're very inclusive. They introduced a trans iconic last year or the year before. They've always been really good about that and really good about listening to their fans in that respect, and I've always liked them for that.
Right. Pathfinder's good, too, in just that if you have players or a group that loves having lots of stuff, Pathfinder as it stands now has 4, maybe 5 bestiaries of monsters, everything from all kinds of goblins to the Jabberwocky from Lewis Carroll is a monster in Pathfinder, and that's not something that exists in 5th edition. And they have a million different classes, and every class has a million different basically subclasses, archetypes for it. So if you want to be a sword mage, or I guess it's a magus is what it's called, or an alchemist, or a witch, there's a class for that. You want to be a psychic or a mesmerist, there's a class for that.
And I didn't want to lead with that because it's something I love, but it's not something that I think it's I think it's also one of the things that is holding Pathfinder back is the glut of options. Even I, who ran the game for half a decade and played in it forever, was having trouble keeping track of all of the different character options toward the end. And that's not a bad thing. It is very, very fun to create a character in Pathfinder if you have a lot of time and you have system mastery and you want to make something truly mechanically unique. There are options that are utterly unlike anything that you can produce in any other game. But it's a little hard to keep track of, to be honest. And it's overwhelming to new players.
Yeah, it really is. Unless, and you can, of course, someone would, in Pathfinder's defense, say, you don't have to pour through a million different source books. You can make a character from just the original books. I've done that in a campaign. And while there's nothing that will rob you of your fun if you want to have it, if you don't look at those, then your character will probably be not as good as the people who poured through those things. So it's kind of both a good and bad thing. And that's something that's a little bit different about Pathfinder. Like when they released their original rulebook, it was over 400 pages long. It's a beast. It falls apart. I'm looking at mine on my shelf right now. The bindings cannot hold all of the contents within.
It really is, it's a tremendous amount of content. Even if you buy all of the books, there's still the adventure paths and the what are the little mini modules for not Adventurers League, Pathfinder Society called. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
They have little self-contained mini adventures for their group play, which Pathfinder Society is tremendous and a great success that I want to say Adventurers League for 5th edition was probably based off of. In any case,
sure.
The amount of material that you have to go through to truly understand all of the possible options is catastrophic. Like Matt said, though, you can always say to your players, oh, we're only using these books. But the problem there is that it's all available on the internet. I tried to run a game a few years ago where I said, look, we're just going to use the core rulebook and the player's handbook and the advanced player's guide. And my players immediately went online and found every single option and came back to me. One player wanted to be a centaur, one player wanted to be an awakened gorilla, and it went off the rails from there. So, just be aware that this was one of the reasons why many of us, especially those of us who run games for new players, switched to 5th edition, and we're happy to do so.
Right.
Even though I really love Pathfinder. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's crunchy in the right way. I think it's got a great feel, but it is intimidating for new players and it is difficult to keep track of everything.
First edition Pathfinder is not called Mathfinder unfairly.
Unfairly, yeah.
Every class, every spell, everything adds a fiddly little bonus to certain things, and keeping track of all of those, especially at mid or high levels, one of my groups that plays Pathfinder, we're doing the Reign of Winter adventure, one of those great adventure paths that Pathfinder and Paizo, as Robert rightly said, are great for. We can't play without a chalkboard next to the table to keep track of all of the bonuses from spells and other abilities that are going on. Otherwise, it's just impossible.
And it also suffers from... It tried to innovate on the 3.5 formula without changing it too much, and it suffers a little bit from trying to stay close to that. Part of, one of the things that it suffers from is that players still get iterative attacks, which are a good way to, increase your damage bonus if you're a martial character. But it also requires you to stand still or, pounce or something, or do something equally, or be an archer in order to get your full attack bonus. And, of course, it means that if you build for it, you can be getting something like 10 attacks around. That's a low estimate. You can get much higher than that, but like 10 attacks around, and that really slows the game down. And it's one of the reasons why you're able to run 2 or 3 or 4 combats in 5th edition, but generally, I don't know, Matt, in your Rate of Winter, do you ever get past 1 combat in a session?
Maybe we've done 2, but that's a rarity. So it's pretty slow. I mean, we're very high levels, but one of the benefits of the pulpy publishing of not being in Forgotten Realms is this adventure path. We were fucking fighting the evil Rasputin in 1920 Russia, who's the son of Baba Yaga or something like that. It's cool stuff, and they've done a ton of cool things with their world. Like, there's so many flavorful places, like Numeria, a barbarian kingdom built around a crashed alien spaceship. But then, as Robert said, or like a realm run by warlocks that the aristocracy signed a pact with Asmodeus.
Or a magic-free zone where they invented guns and, they have marshals and things like that. But also, like Matt was undoubtedly going to get to, there's just fantasy Egypt and fantasy Spain and fantasy Africa.
Right.
And
for every one of those, there's one other thing. And when you put them all together in one world, it has no theme, right?
Right.
You're like, wait a second. One place has sheriffs with firearms, but if I go over here, everyone's grubby medieval peasants. And if I go over here, it's a really bad take on the French Revolution. Galt, anyone?
Yeah. Some are tremendous, like Chiliax. It's run by devils. It makes perfect sense, and it's such an interesting take on a very obvious idea. If there are devils, why wouldn't they run their own nation? Why would they be satisfied to just pull the strings from behind the scenes? But enough talking about what Pathfinder is currently.
That was what it was. All that is in the past. If you have Pathfinder books, they're about to explode and burn away. You can never use them again, which is a common complaint with second edition. So putting that aside, there's a new edition of Pathfinder, which is really exciting. It's been 10 years. So they have released some basic outlines of what they're thinking. They're running this in play tests. I've listened to all of them that are available, and the whole thing is going to be released for free in August.
That's right. Yeah, it's been 10 years since they released Pathfinder Alpha, or whatever it was, when they were just starting to test the new system. So they have always been sort of coy about whether or not they were going to release a second edition. And Pathfinder, the thing is, we joked at the beginning about failing Pathfinder, but it's actually doing very well. It's held steady. It's not growing as fast as 5th edition is, but it's still very strong. But it does seem like now is a very good time to release a second edition. They've got, their brand is strong. They've got the time to do it. And they have definitely reached the point where there is serious bloat in the system. So I think this is a good business decision, and it doesn't in any way reflect bad sales or trouble on the Paizo front. If anything, it's a growth opportunity. But what's exciting about what we've seen so far about the Pathfinder second edition, Matt? What are you most interested in?
Well, so a couple things that really excite me, and a couple things that sort of worry me and make me think I might not jump back in. I'm excited for anything that keeps some of that Pathfinder charm, but making it easier to play. So just the whole concept of a second edition is something you don't have to sell me too hard on. I think the thing that we've heard of the most so far is sort of a restructuring of how combat works. as Robert mentioned, it's hard to get through a Pathfinder combat. The new economy is something like every player during a turn of combat, so this when you roll initiative and stuff, just gets 3 actions per turn. And right, those can be anything: casting a spell, sometimes takes 1 or 2 actions, moving is 1, attacking is 1, so you could attack 3 times, move 3 times. It's super simple.
And so this seems innovative, but other role-playing systems, almost all of them, in fact, that are not Dungeons & Dragons, adopt a much simpler action system. Almost exactly like this. So it seems innovative, and it is, and I'm very glad they're doing it, but all it is bringing Dungeons & Dragons in line functionally with every other RPG on the market, which, for all their failings and flaws, at the very least, I don't think there's a single one that's as difficult to get through as 3.5 ever was. That, minor quibble aside, this is a great move, and I'm really excited to see how they balance it, to be honest. One of the questions that was asked of them in one of the FAQs was if they're going to work on balancing martial and casting characters. And this was
like a fighter versus a wizard.
A fighter versus wizard. So the saying goes that Pathfinder and 3.5 has linear fighters and quadratic wizards, which means that they both start out at roughly the same power level, but very, very rapidly the wizard overtakes a fighter. Your very best built fighter at 15th through 20th level can, really fuck up a giant. They can run up and hit it a whole bunch of times and do a really tremendous amount of damage. If they're built right, they can, get a bunch of almost guaranteed crits and take the thing down. But a 15th through 20th wizard can literally reshape reality, can create demi-planes and summon, CR20 pit fiends and other nonsense. And it's just not... It's just not equitable. And that doesn't matter to everybody, but it
doesn't matter to me. I sort of like that, but
Matt likes that. Matt also always plays casting characters. As a martial player,
it's not true.
It was frustrating, not game breaking, but frustrating, especially when, in certain situations more so than others. But I do think that it's a good idea to bring them sort of into alignment. I don't think that you can ever have a fighter and a wizard function similarly, and that's okay. But I do think this is an interesting thing for Paizo to try to address, and I think the action economy is one way that they will try to do it. So I'm interested to see how they'll balance that.
I agree with you as long as you're coming from the perspective of a role-playing game as a team game and not some weird death match in a 30-foot by 30-foot featureless room where a fighter is fighting a rogue or a fighter is fighting a wizard, or they're both hitting a imaginary dummy and seeing who can do the most damage per round. Because if you've ever actually sat down and played a role-playing game, they don't really work like that. But I think the real way to balance it is to make sure that fighters and other characters that can't cast spells still feel useful at very high levels.
Right, and that's the key. And I some of that has to do with how skill points worked in Pathfinder, and some of it had to do with how many feats were required to be a functional and interesting martial character. So with those things reworked, maybe it will open up some build possibilities. Part of the complaint is that fighters in Pathfinder, this is got 2 skill points or something like that, something preposterously low. And so even on top of not being able to cast spells, they couldn't even contribute out of combat all that well. Right. So we'll see what happens there. Matt is right that it's not a death match, and not everybody needs to be contributing the exact same amount of DPS. And this is one of the things that made 4th edition actually unfun. So lesson learned there. Or sorry, some people thought made it unfun. I could go either way. Right. But so it remains to be seen how Pathfinder 2.0 intends to address this, but it is an interesting position to take, I think.
I think my judgment on 2nd edition when the playtest comes out, and we'll revisit this in August, is can you play Pathfinder in a way that it's easy enough to introduce to new players? Because every one of my games has new players. I'm sorry. It's the way the world works.
Mine too.
Have to have
Mine too.
Game systems have to be teachable. 2, can I get through a combat in under half an hour? 3, I think I'm really looking for like some, what Pathfinder did well as we talked about, is its breadth of options for really making any kind of thing you wanted to be. For example, Robert in one of my games was like a guy who had been experimented on by mind flayers and could throw things around with his mind, and that was super cool. In one of Robert's games, one of my characters was basically Spider-Man, possessed by an ancient mummy lord lich wizard, and he had a cool suit of armor, like the blue scarab, the red scarab. Beetle Bailey. What was the name of that? I don't remember the name of the cartoon character.
It was the something scarab. But yeah, so I agree 100% with Matt. The real test will be, do you still have the breadth of options, and are they comprehensible? Not overwhelming. Is it teachable to new players? And this is probably the most important. I didn't think I wanted second edition that bad, but when it was announced, I got really excited.
Yeah, I got excited.
I have to admit that I really like Pathfinder. I have a fondness for the system, and I have a fondness for the setting. So I'm willing to be forgiving, but it has to be faster. And that's the thing. It doesn't matter how good and rich the system is. If it takes me an hour to get through a combat, I can't. I'm not going to switch away from 5th edition, where I can do so much more in one session, especially now that I don't have time for 4-hour, 5-hour games.
Yeah, here's an example of just, what a high bar Pathfinder 2nd edition has to live up to. So I'm playing a 5th edition game that is a mix of sci-fi and high magic elements. My players were wandering through caverns that were 0G. They were floating around, and I realized I hadn't written any rules for 0G combat. And right on the spot, I said, and my players were like, "Ooh, how are we going to fight in 0G?" I said, if you're making a melee attack, it's at disadvantage unless you're anchored to something. Ranged attacks work as normal unless you're firing a heavy gun, and then you also have to be anchored at something, or you're also at disadvantage. Boom, it was done. The players understood, like, oh yeah, it's hard to swing around the air. I know I'll have disadvantage if I did that. They adjusted their actions accordingly, and we had this cool combat where, zombies were launching themselves across a gravityless cavern, and it worked. And in Pathfinder, I don't know how I would do that without making the players do a ton of math or coming up with some subsystem that I don't want to learn.
I almost guarantee you that there are rules, and that they're not impossible to understand, but you have to dig for them. Just like there's rules for underwater combat and rules for mounted combat and all that stuff. Yeah. And that's great if you want to play that way, but what is great about 5th edition is it makes it so easy to get through that. I barely ever have to stop and dig through the rule book in 5th edition. And I did have to do that pretty often in Pathfinder, even though I had been running it forever.
Yeah, the rule book comes out all the time in Pathfinder. And if they can make an edition where that is not the case, then that will be a success. One other thing that I'm really sort of like about what they've released, and there's not a lot so far, but another high point for me is I think 5th edition has this weird sort of action economy where you can move every round and you can take a reaction, and then some classes get bonus actions and others don't, and then you can take an action. And if you've played it, you understand this enough, but it's not obvious at first. So doing something like what Pathfinder's doing, saying you get 3 actions around, you get a reaction, it sort of puts everything out there, and so players know that if I want to get the most, I should try and maximize what I'm doing, so I take all of those actions. And that sounds great to me.
And the truth is, I love 5th edition, I will continue playing it, but it does feel still just like a little shallow. Right. There's not quite enough crunch for me. And it feels like most characters of the same class do generally resemble each other, with some very notable exceptions. Right. Some classes have a lot of like very good variants, but others not so much. And so
in Pathfinder, two rogues may look nothing alike, right? One could be a big burly guy with a lot of strength, a half orc, warrior with a great sword, and another might be a sneaky little goblin person. And they're the same class, and they would be played and role played because our role playing does build on the mechanics of the system.
Right.
In completely different ways.
It will be, regardless of what happens, it will be a different type of system than 5th edition, and there will absolutely be room for both. This is, I think, what's so perhaps most exciting about it, is that I really think that there's room in the market for both 5th edition and for Pathfinder, and Pathfinder positioning itself to be a little bit more accessible is, I think, a really great thing. We could see, especially if one of these big streaming services, and by the way, I noticed that Matt Mercer tweeted about being interested in Pathfinder, but if one of these big, Let's Plays picks...
That would be so funny if he switched. There's all these...
Oh, gotta be hilarious.
Man.
I actually think that might break the community. I don't think he will. But maybe we can talk about that later. Probably not him, but maybe somebody else, or maybe a new one will launch. But I think that we could see an even, a growth. It could attract some crunchier, some nerdier players who are interested in more granular detail. And I think that's terrific. I think it's a great sign for the health of the hobby, and it can only be good.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. And so let's talk about what else we've learned about the system, and maybe some things that give us some pause. So Robert and I have never gotten around to doing a review of Starfinder, which is a cool idea. So cool, I'm running a 5th edition game based off of it, of like a basically far future fantasy world where magic and technology exist, but the system that they released for Starfinder, their brand new system, is spoilers on our eventual review of this, is in my opinion not that great.
And I've only had cursory interaction with it, and I'm more forgiving than Matt is, but I'd like to hear what you think is not great about it, because I probably agree, but I think it's neat and I'm willing to be forgiving, but there's some obvious flaws.
Well, one of the things is that one of the problems with Pathfinder 1st edition is you really needed like a bunch of magic items, and they sort of took the example wealth by level guidelines from 3.5, and now those are like part of the rule book. Like if you're a 10th level fighter with no magic items, you're like worse than a 5th level fighter with the correct magic items. And there are correct magic items to have. And instead of sort of solving this in Starfinder, they basically made every piece of equipment have levels. So like every couple levels you need a new blaster pistol and a new piece of armor and stuff like that. I mean, they're so obnoxious that the Pathfinder people released alternate rules for playing without a ton of magic items, and they didn't work very well. We tried to use them, but I hated it so much that I was like, I will get rid of magic items because it's this annoying.
Paizo has specifically said that they're addressing the magic item problem. I don't know if it's a good point. I don't know if they're doing it in the way that they did with Starfinder, which is not the right way. But so the other side of this is that 5th edition explicitly did away with that dependence on magic items and has created sort of a different problem where it is kind of difficult to reward your players, especially as you get into higher levels. And it places a lot of pressure on the DM to create interesting magic items and find a way to integrate them into the campaign. I do think that generally 5th edition is better. Nobody wants a spreadsheet to have to keep track of everything that they have and make sure that their bonuses are up to date with all of their weapons and armor and natural armor amulets. But yeah, this is one thing to watch out for. We want to see exactly what they mean when they talk about fixing magic items, because I don't know of a single tabletop role-playing game that really does this phenomenally well. I don't know that any of them have completely nailed the loot economy. So we'll see.
There's got to be a middle ground between 5th edition and where Pathfinder is right now, and hopefully they can find that, right? I don't know exactly what it looks like.
That's the ideal. But... Yeah, I have one of my long-term projects is trying to fix this for 5th edition. And I have some interesting ideas, and for one of my homebrew campaigns, I think I have addressed it, but it's hard to say whether or not it's actually fixed. So this is both an opportunity for Paizo to do something really innovative and also a potential pitfall if they're not careful.
All right, I think it's time for hot takes, where I'm going to go through. I've compiled notes of everything that's been released so far. Rob and I will give our quick opinions on them about Pathfinder 2nd Edition, if they make us feel hot and bothered, if they make us a little nervous, or if they make us want to give up. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
I'm ready for the hot takes.
All right, hot take 1, character creation. So they've said that character creation is meant to be very flexible. You pick an ancestry, not a race, a background, and a class. Robert, hot take.
Hot take, good. Paizo has always been good about character creation. I don't want them to simplify it too much because I like all the crunch. Ancestry is brilliant. Stop calling them races. It's weird. No more phrenology jokes. Hot take, good.
Yes. Backgrounds, I gotta see what they do with it. I find 5th edition's backgrounds sort of lukewarm. So if they can do something a little more cool than that, then I'm all for it.
Okay.
2.
Next up.
There are 3 game modes: exploration mode, combat mode, and downtime mode.
A hot take is this sucks. It's gamey and annoys me. I don't like it.
What?
I get why they're doing it. It's not necessary. It's gamey and annoying. I don't like it.
Right. I mean, we all know that sometimes in the game, the dungeon master, maybe you're a player, says, okay, what are you doing for the next couple days while you're resting up in town? Oh, that's downtime. Okay, you're exploring the wilderness. Actions sort of move in minutes or hours. That's exploration. Oh, it's a combat or a chase or something. We're going to go in turns and rounds and stuff. We all know the game sort of has this, but I do get a little nervous making them explicit and hard-baked into the rules.
I don't know that this needs to be structured. I don't see where this is coming from. In my playtest feedback, which I will be giving, I'll be saying this is dumb and it's bad. Take it out.
Yeah, we have already judged you as dumb and bad modes of things. Well, so this is another thing that makes me nervous, is initiative has been reworked. So when you roll for initiative, right, when a DM says roll for initiative because a bunch of spiders dropped from the ceilings or the wizard summoned a demon, and we need to go to rounds in 3.5 in Pathfinder 1st edition. In 5th edition, you make an initiative roll, which has been a d20 plus a modifier, usually your dexterity. It was a weird kind of other stat that sometimes you could get extra bonuses to from other things. Pathfinder was, because combats took forever and became really swingy, I saw lots of players try and get insane bonuses to this thing that is sort of an abstraction initiative, but it's very important. In Pathfinder 2nd edition, if you're in exploration or downtime mode, the DM has to know what every player is doing at that time. So, for example, Rob, if your character was looking around for trouble, your initiative check would be a perception skill roll. Then you might roll, or if it was climbing a hill, you might make an acrobatics check for your initiative roll. So your initiative depends on what you were doing before when the DM called for rolling for initiative.
I don't care for it. I want to see how it plays out in actual gameplay, but initial reaction is not good.
Yeah.
That's my hot take.
What is that? My hot take is, what does that actually add? I mean, you're still rolling a d20, so sometimes the person who's supposed to be super fast is going to go last. Sometimes the other person is going to go first. I hate that it makes the dungeon master keep track of what everyone is doing. Sometimes people just want to tag along and let someone else take the lead, right? But if combat's going to break out, then you really do need to know what everyone's doing at all times.
All right, next up.
Okay, the new background system and the entire game will be unlike the original first Pathfinder edition, which was pretty much setting neutral. Didn't have anything other than the information about the game mechanics. This one will be infused like a reduction sauce of a fine baked cod, infused with the lore of Golarion, which is their, setting world. So Pathfinder 2nd edition will be tied more strongly to the lore they have created.
probably bad. I think in the long run, this gets it away from one of the best parts of its roots, which is the OGL part of it, the open gaming license, and the fact that you can run it without having anything linked to any particular setting. This is one of my major complaints about 5th edition, is that so much is baked in setting-wise to the classes. That being said, Galarian is fine. Paizo has always been pretty good about keeping things accessible, so I'm willing to give it a pass.
Yeah. I don't particularly care for Galarian, but as we've discussed before, there are parts of it that are super interesting. So the thing that's shitty is I feel like it's more work on us DMs saying like, hey players, you know, this is a pulpy game with gunslingers and stuff like that. Please don't pick a brave knight in chainmail, which, because Galarian has every goddamn thing under the sun, that will be part of it.
All right, what's left?
Okay, I got 2 more things. Okay. In the core rulebook, 1, goblins will be right up there in that probably first or second chapter as a playable character race, along with all the races that are the standard D&D ones. So half-elves, half-orcs, dwarves, gnomes, halflings, elves, dwarves, and humans. So goblins are added to that.
I think that's terrific. And Paizo has always had an affinity for goblins. Their goblins have had, been sort of the part of the art and the representation of the company from the very beginning. The Galarian Paizo goblins are kind of mischievous, but also terrifyingly evil and hilarious. And as long as they're balanced with all the other races, I think this can only be good. Yeah. I think it fits with the theme and tone of the game, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, you got a large, monstrous race in the half-orc. Why not a small, more mischievous monster race in the goblin? I am for that as well. Second thing, all the classes from the original edition will be in the new rulebook. These are the exact same classes from 5th edition minus the warlock. There's no warlocks in Pathfinder. Plus the alchemist. The alchemist will be released in the new rules.
Mostly good, I think. The alchemist is one of the stronger classes. One of the best things about Paizo was actually when they got away from the core classes. Their advanced classes, the ones that came out in the Advanced Player's Guide, the Gunslinger, the Alchemist, the Cavalier,
the Witch,
the
Inquisitor,
were very good. The Inquisitor, thank you. Were very, very good. They were flavorful. They were well balanced. They had unique roles. They were substantially better than most of the core classes that Paizo created to stick with 3.5. So anytime they get to be innovative, I think that they do really, really well. So I'm sad that it's only the Alchemist, but I'm happy that it is the Alchemist. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I have played the Alchemist. The one thing that always bothers me about Alchemist is and I hope they fix this in 2nd edition, is the sort of gaminess of some of their things. They're like, because if you're an alchemist, let's say you're creating like hand grenades and pieces of alchemist fire and stuff like that, it reasons like, oh, okay, I'm going to pass a bomb around and light a fuse to everyone in my party. You can't do that, right? Or right. You've got to like basically create some rules that players that don't like keeping track of material components can still do it. So you can't just the vials that you create your alchemist fire in disappear after you throw them. Like, what? You're a right. magical glass factory, but you can't keep them. I'm like, I hate that.
You need 2 paragraphs to explain why you can't create one bomb one round and another bomb the next round and throw them both on the 3rd round.
Yep.
Because that would, and that's for balance reasons totally fine, but it is, Matt is right, it's kind of gamey and frustrating, so hopefully they get away from that. Yeah. All right, we are coming up on time. Matt, any final thoughts on 2nd edition?
Yeah, so I think my final judgments, listening to their podcasts and stuff, some of the things were really exciting, like making it fun for players when it's not their turn with fun reactions. Like I think I saw a parry and a shield block. So if they can fix their combat where it goes faster and really still keep what made Pathfinder 1st edition strong, then I'll be along for the ride for the 2nd edition. I'm excited. Final judgments?
I'm excited about it too. There's plenty to be concerned about, but I think this is a real opportunity for Paizo to reinvent and redirect and make things a little bit simpler and get away from that Pathfinder designation. Right. And I want them to succeed, and I hope they do it. And I'm very excited. We'll be playtesting.
Yes.
We will get back to you in August when we have had a chance to get our hands on the materials, and we'll deliver some more concrete judgments along the way.
I think the final and what to watch for is if the communities change. If you go to talk to any 5th edition player or find them in their online spaces, they're talking about the fun stories they made, probably a lot of fan art and stuff like that. If you go to Pathfinder spaces these days, I noticed this when I was last at a gaming convention or last online, they're talking about builds and math and which option is better, and it seems boring and sad, and I hope that the new edition can infuse Pathfinder with new players where they're actually talking about the games they're playing, not so much the skeleton that makes them fun.
All right, stay tuned for more information about Pathfinder 2.0 and the exciting relaunch of Dragons of America. We'll see you next time, players.
Christ. Racism dragons. Launch!